Hello everybody. In this video we're going to take a look at how you're going to animate your neon sign while keeping your Maya file organized and maintaining your sanity. So my scene is already very complicated because I have a number of different curves in here, as you can see. But I'm going to go ahead and select all my curves at once, and I'm going to go to Generate, Curve Utilities, and Attach Brush to Curves to begin creating this example of a neon sign. Now, as you'll notice, my Maya file is actually getting even more complicated because I have all of these groups here that have a number of different animation curves in them. But on top of that, I now have a total of 48 strokes in here as well. Now I'm going to take all of these strokes and I'm going to convert them into polygon objects by going to Modify, Convert, Paint Effects to Polygons. I'm going to make sure that it's on quad output and apply. And now my scene has gotten even more complicated because not only do I have my curves here, my strokes here, but now I also have my geometry in these groups here. I think the first thing I'll do to keep things a little more organized so that the scene doesn't look as busy as it does is I'll select these four groups that have my NURBS curves in them, and I'll go to Edit Group, and I'll simply call that My Curves. You can see the group is down here. This is a great way to keep things organized because I can collapse the group here, and then I only see it as my curves. If I need to actually access them individually, I can navigate inside the group and do so. I'll do the same with the strokes. Select them, go to Edit, Group, and I'll call this group My Strokes. And finally, I'll select these groups, I'll group them, and call it My Meshes. And you can see how much more organized my outliner looks now, because I have everything regarding groups in this group, everything regarding curves in this group, everything regarding strokes in this one, and then everything, all my meshes in this one here. Now earlier I created some materials for my geometry here. I'm going to go ahead and select this stage 1 here. Go to my hypershade and I'll apply the green neon to those. I'll select the geometry for stage 2 and I'll assign the red neon color I created. And stage 3, I'll assign the yellow to all of that geometry. So missed one here. Let me select that as well and apply. Okay, and here's what we've got. We're going to treat material this selection here of material a little differently, and we'll get to that later. But let's go ahead and take a render and see how this is looking. And here is what we've got so far. So we're going to be working with the polygon geometry at this point. We're not going to really be using the curves or the strokes. And in fact, if I knew I didn't need them anymore, I might just delete them. That would be a way of making my file even cleaner. But for the time being, I'm going to go ahead and keep them, but I will hide them by selecting the two groups and then coming over here to my channel box and under the visibility, typing 0. This will just hide them so that I don't accidentally select them as I work on this polygon geometry. Let's take a look at how we're going to be animating your neon sign. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of my polygon objects here, the S in this case, and we're going to set some keys on it. This is the timeline down here. This represents time in frames, just so that you understand what these numbers actually mean. The default Maya setting is typically set to 24 frames a second, meaning that for every second of animation, you have 24 frames or images. In fact, we can take a look here in our animation preferences, and you'll notice that, in fact, that is what it's set to, 24 frames per second. In fact, it would probably be better off right now for this video if we change the playback speed also to 24 frames. Now, so that you understand how animation works, I'll just do a quick illustration of this. S on your keyboard stands for set key, and if I press S on my keyboard, I'll get this tick mark here indicating that there's a keyframe on it, and you will also notice in my channel box that all 10 of these channels have been animated. Now, if I take my timeline and I scrub it to frame 24, and I move this up and rotate it and scale it, or whatever else I choose to do with it, and then I press S on my keyboard, I'll get a second keyframe on it. And if I scrub in my timeline, you'll see that it's animated on all those different channels. I can play the animation as well, and you see that it is animated. Now, that's not typically how a neon sign would be animated, however. So I'm going to get rid of this animation and show you a simpler way. I'm going to make sure my timeline is back to frame 1. I will select these channels in my channel box, right-click, cut select. That gets rid of the animation. The only property we're going to be concerned with here is the visibility. So here's how I'm going to key just visibility. If you press S, it keys all of these channels. We don't need that. We only need to animate visibility. So in frame 1, with my object selected, I'm going to come over here to visibility, right-click on it, and key selected. So we have a key here. Visibility indicates that it's on. And then I'm going to scrub my timeline to frame 24, 1 second later. I will type 0 in the visibility, and I will key that. So now, if I scrub in my timeline, the S is on until I get to frame 24, and then it turns off. Now, I still have this letter selected. You can see that it doesn't have a very good naming convention here. It can be very, very confusing here, which is why I'm making this video. I'm going to show you how to keep your file organized and maintain your sanity, as I said before. But I still have it selected, so I'm going to scrub to frame 48, in other words, 2 seconds into my animation, and I'm going to type 1, and that will turn that back on, and then I will key that. So now, if I scrub in my timeline, the S is visible until I get to frame 24. It turns off. It's off for 1 second, and then it turns back on frame 48. And if I play it, you'll see that that's exactly what's happening. Now, I could individually animate each one of these different objects here, but you can see where that's going to get very, very complicated. So I'm going to show you an easier way that will not require you to animate every single individual object in here. And to do that, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the animation on this S. Again, I'll make sure that I'm on frame 1, and I'll just select my channels in the channel box and cut selected to get rid of that animation. And now we'll take a look at an easier, better way that'll help you keep your file organized as well as I said earlier, maintain your sanity. So we're going to actually organize this file a little differently than what I showed you here, where we just organized it according to the type, curves, meshes, and strokes. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything in stage 1, and I'm going to group that. Go to Edit, Group. And we'll even call this group Stage 1. I'll do the same for these other groups as well, or for these other pieces of geometry. Stage 02, for example. Edit, Group. We'll call that one Stage 02. And I'll do the same for this one. Select it, group it. We'll call it Stage 03. And this last one, we can go ahead and do that too, even though we'll be looking at it later. I will call this one Material. I'll just keep it the same name as what it says. Okay, so I've got everything organized here, and in fact, if we open up this group, the My Meshes group, you'll notice that I've got Stage 1, Stage 2, and Stage 3, as well as Material. In fact, I also have a bunch of junk in here that doesn't really help me. So I think what I'll do to get rid of that is delete history on these objects. I'll select them and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Now I thought it was going to get rid of these junk groups. It didn't, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete them. Just to kind of clean things up. So in My Meshes, I have a Stage 1 group. It's got everything in there associated with that group. I've got a Stage 2 group, a Stage 3, and a Material group. So how is this going to help us? Well, instead of animating each of these individual objects in the group, we can simply animate the group. And let's take a look at that. So currently I have Stage 1 selected. I'm going to come over here once again to my channel box. I will select the word visibility in the channel box, right click on it, key selected. I'm going to scrub to frame 24 1 second later, and I will set visibility to 0, which will turn it off, and I will key it. Now, one of the benefits of what I'm showing you now, as opposed to what we were looking at earlier, is if I deselect it, it's not a problem because I can just select it from my outliner. I named it, I know exactly what it is. I'm not going to lose it here. I'm going to go ahead and scrub to frame 48. No, you know what? I think I'll leave it at that for now. So here it is. Stage 1 is on for 1 second, and then it turns off. I'm going to select Stage 2 and Stage 3, both of them, and I'll animate both of them as well. I'm going to set a key on frame 1 for the visibility, but I'm going to turn them off. I'll select the word visibility, right click on it, key it. I'll select Stage 1, scrub in my timeline to the point where stage 1 disappears. And I'm going to turn on stage 2 on that same exact frame. You can see that stage 1 turns off on frame 24, and I'm going to turn on stage 2 by typing 1 in visibility. I'll key that and scrub to frame 48, the 2-second mark, and I'll turn it off. I'll key it by selecting visibility, right-clicking on it, key select. It's been keyed off now, and I'll select stage 3 from my outliner. Change its visibility to 1, which will turn it on. Right-click on visibility, key that as well. I'll scrub in my timeline to frame 72, and I'll turn it off as well. Now, if I forget to key it and I scrub in my timeline, it'll come back on. I haven't keyed it. So remember to make sure when you turn off the visibility that you key it. Now, if we play the animation, you'll see that for 1 second we have stage 1, then stage 2, and then stage 3. So you can see that I have these 3 animated now. On frame 72, they're all off. What I think I'll do is perhaps maybe just a quarter of a second. So we'll go to frame 78. I'm going to select all 3 stages, turn them on, key them. We'll have them stay on for a quarter of a second, so for 6 frames. And we'll turn them off again. Keep them off for another 6 frames. Turn them back on. Turn them off, key them. And we'll do it one more time. So go to frame 102, turn them on, key them, and go to frame 108, turn them off. Now, if we play the animation, this is what we'll get. Actually, let me deselect them so that you can actually see the colors that have been applied to them. And they're now animated. So you can see how much easier it is to animate these groups rather than all the different objects within the group. Now, what if we want to change the timing of this? Maybe the timing isn't quite what we had in mind. Let's take a look at how we can quickly and easily do that. I'm going to select all 3 groups that have been animated. And what I'm going to do is go to my Windows, Animation Editors, Dope Sheet. And in my dope sheet, you'll see that we have our stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 in here. And just so that you understand how to read this dope sheet, you'll notice that this is time in frames. And then these are our animation keys. And you'll notice how they're all synced up because that's how I animated them. So let's say that we want to change the timing of it. Just as an example, let's say that I actually want stage 1 to turn on frame 12. Currently, it's turning on at frame 24, but I want it to turn on frame 12. What I'll do is select the keyframe in the dope sheet, middle mouse drag it to frame 12, and now instead of taking a full second before it turns off, it'll take half a second and then turn off on frame 12. I'm going to undo that. I'll select all 3 of my groups and we'll just take a look at how we can change the timing of all 3 at the same time. So currently I have all 3 of these stages turning on and off here. Let's say that the last part I want it to turn off much more quickly, not over 6 frames, but over 3 frames instead. So it'll be a much shorter time that it's on. What I'll simply do is select those keys in my dope sheet, middle mouse drag them, and now that timing has been adjusted. Let's take a look at a couple more things regarding the grouping and animation that I think will be useful for you. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to create a cube. I'll just scale up the cube a little so you can see it better. Because what I'd like you to see is, again, some of the strength of animating these groups rather than the objects inside them. So remember that this cube is not using the same material as the stage 1, and currently it's not animated. However, if I were to middle mouse drag it and put it into stage 1, it will now be animated using group stage 1's visibility, which you'll see if I play this. In fact, let's go ahead and create a couple more polygon primitives. I'll make a sphere and a cone. I'll take the sphere and drag it into group 2. I'll take the cone and grab it and drag it into stage 3. Or if I wish, I could rearrange them. This time I'll take cube 1, put it into stage 2. We'll take the cone 1, drag it into stage 1, and let's see what we get now. So you can see that this gives you great flexibility and ease to rearrange, add, subtract from your animations. So that is how I want you to animate your neon sign using visibility. This is a quick and easy way to animate your neon sign. However, in the next video, I am going to show you a more advanced approach that involves animating the material itself. So I'll see you then. Thank you for watching.